Hello patrons and subscribers and new arrivals. My name is Random Rob. Welcome to the new show. And let me ask you a question. Are you more of a reanimator person or are you more of a from beyond person? In my case, the answer is definitely from beyond. From 1986. And director Stuart Gordon had this idea of doing a series of modern interpretations of H.P. Lovecraft stories. Starting with the very successful Reanimator the previous year, followed by From Beyond in 1986. Both of these films would have many of the same production crew, including Gordon, his friend and producer Brian Yuzna, who helped adapt the Lovecraft stories, screenwriter Dennis Paoli, makeup effects by John Buechler, and both films would also star Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton. Crampton and Combs would not work with Gordon again until 1995 for his movie Castle Freak, which became a direct-to-video release. Gordon also adapted two other Lovecraft stories in following years. In order to cut costs, the entire film was shot at a film studio called Dino Sitta in Italy. Dino Sitta was a studio that was built by the legendary Dino De Laurentiis, but was seized by the Italian government over unpaid taxes. And the studio ended up being acquired by Empire Films. The benefits of shooting in Italy meant that Gordon could make a film that would have cost $15 million in America and make it for $2.5 million in Italy. Most of the actors involved with the production said it was a lot of fun staying in Italy, especially Jeffrey Combs. Although the one problem that they had during shooting was that the Italian crew members were used to shooting films that were shot to be dubbed. So none of the stagehand or Italian crew members ever worried about making noise while any shooting was going on because it was all going to be dubbed anyway. Apparently this drove director Stuart Gordon a little crazy, just trying to keep the Italian crew quiet while they were shooting. As on Reanimator, director Stuart Gordon involved real medical advisors in making the film so that the procedures shown in the psychiatric hospital would look accurate. Now, on the possibility you haven't seen From Beyond, I'll give a little bit of a plot recap and then talk about some of my personal impressions and analysis of the film. So, the original From Beyond by H.P. Lovecraft is a 7-page short story. And what I love about Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna's adaptation of this film is that they use the short story essentially as the opening scene of the film, and then everything that follows after the opening credits is all an expansion on the ideas of the original material. So despite the fact that the movie takes some wild turns in terms of where the original story was coming from, you can still say that the beginning of this film is a pretty accurate adaptation of the original story in any case. Crawford Tillinghast is the mild-mannered assistant to the brilliant and sadomasochistic Dr. Edward Pretorius, played by Ted Sorrell. As the film begins, Crawford has managed to activate the resonator, a device that Dr. Pretorius has built to increase the range of human senses, letting people essentially see beyond the ordinary frequencies of light that we can see into the other dimensions that surround us. When Crawford activates the resonator, he sees this strange, fibrous, fishy creature circling around the top of the resonator, and he reaches out towards it. It attacks him, bites his face, he turns the resonator off, and it vanishes. He rushes to tell Dr. Pretorius what's happened. Pretorius goes back up to the attic of the small house where they work, removes all the safeties, and turns the resonator on at full power. And as the vibrations of the machine fill the attic, and Crawford and Dr. Pretorius begin to see into this other dimension, Dr. Pretorius says the ominous words, "Something's coming." A concerned female neighbor calls the police and goes over to the house to see what's happened. She runs into Crawford Tillinghast in a state of complete panic, trying to escape the attic. He's swung an axe to cut through the door. The police arrive and immediately arrest him and find Dr. Pretorius's body in the attic with his head completely twisted off. Tillinghast ends up in an asylum, and his case comes to the attention of the young and beautiful Dr. Catherine McMichaels, played by Barbara Crampton. Crampton is convinced that there is something to Tillinghast's story about the resonator, and is particularly interested in the effect it seems to have had on Tillinghast's pineal gland, which is expanding inside his brain. The chief psychiatrist at the sanitarium, Dr. Block, played by Stuart Gordon's then wife, Carolyn Purdy Gordon, believes that this expansion of the pineal gland is causing hallucinations and driving Tillinghast crazy. But Dr. McMichaels thinks that this might be some new kind of sensory organ. Under the supervision of Detective Buford Brown, played by Ken Forey, who most will remember as Peter from the 1978 Dawn of the Dead, Dr. McMichaels takes Tillinghast back to the Pretorius mansion to reactivate the resonator and try to recreate the experiment. Despite Crawford's insistence that the malevolent entity which tore off Dr. Pretorius's head is still out there and will certainly show up again. Among other discoveries Dr. McMichaels and Detective Brown make at the house is that Dr. Pretorius was a fervent sadomasochist, to which Tillinghast explains that Pretorius was brilliant, that he just was not happy with the five senses, he wanted more. Eventually they activate the resonator, Pretorius returns, but it quickly becomes clear that this extra-dimensional creature that ate him has now possessed him, and that it would very much like to consume them too. Narrowly shutting off the resonator in time before it can attack them, the three principal characters go to eat a meal together and talk about what to do next. And it becomes apparent that besides just activating their pineal glands and increasing their sensory perception, the resonator also increases feelings of sexual arousal, and that this whole experience is in itself addictive, and that despite the protestations of Tillinghast, Dr. McMichaels wants to turn the machine on again and wants to see more, and begins to show signs that she is becoming addicted and unbalanced by the experience. And this is before any of them realize that the creature that has become Dr. Pretorius has found a way to turn the machine on from beyond. And in case you've never seen this movie, I'll leave the description right there. I remember seeing this movie when it came out on videocassette. The era of the independent video store. God, I miss that. I remember going over to one of my best friend's houses and watching this one weekend. We had a blast. I thought Barbara Crampton was one of the sexiest women I had ever seen on screen. And I loved the intensity of Jeffrey Combs' performance. It's really a great follow-up to Reanimator in how it changes the dynamic of Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton's characters in both those films, where in Reanimator, Jeffrey Combs is the brilliant and amoral scientist who doesn't seem to care how much damage his experiments cost, and Barbara Crampton is more of the submissive girl in trouble. And then in From Beyond, it's Combs' character who's the shy, repressed one, and Dr. McMichaels is the one who is pushing all these bad events into happening by not listening to his warnings. This was really the first horror film I remember seeing that was actually sexy. That is to say, so many horror films in the mid-'80s, having their lead female actresses show their tits was just a thing. You know, the showing of tits was always exploitational, but it was never really sexy within most horror movies. And this film was different. This film was sexy. Pervy, even. And I don't know what happened to pervy horror. but I wish it would make a comeback because it's fun. And if you've never seen this movie before, check it out. It is a blast. It's funny, it's gory, it's got lots of weird ideas crammed into it. I just think it's always ironic. You can always find these interesting big ideas in little low-budget films that you never see explored in big-budget horror films. There's something to be said for that. Now, is From Beyond a perfect film? Not quite. There is a point when you begin to wonder why don't they just shut the resonator off and dismantle it. And the climactic fight scene between Pretorius and Tillinghast inside the mutated body of Pretorius does get pretty comedic. Part of this is because the production of the film literally ran out of money before they could finish all the effects for the final scene. Nonetheless, the film still manages to end on a suitably ambiguous and creepy note. Now, I do have one problem with I guess it's the Scream Factory Blu-ray, and I don't have any problems with the transfer or anything. It's great to see this film restored to its original look. My problem has to do more with the fact that the new version is considered a director's cut because it has basically one gory scene that was removed from the theatrical release, put back in the film. And this it annoys me because it's a gory sequence that I wish they had left out. This is the sequence where Crawford Tillinghast has returned to the hospital after his pineal gland has expanded and shot out of the front of his head as a sensory organ, and he has the compulsion to eat people's brains. And there's a scene where he corners Dr. Block in a medical room. And the original sequence in the film wasn't especially gory. He grabs her and starts to bite her face, and it cuts away, and you kind of get the point. The original effect that they had planned has Tillinghast punching Dr. Block in the stomach, and then somehow this knocks one of her eyes out, and then he's sucking on her eye socket as blood is streaming out all over her gown. And the one thing about this movie that's great is how much it flirts with tackiness without necessarily becoming really tacky. And this sequence of gore, it's really tacky. It brings the movie down a notch. And the reason I don't think of it as a director's cut is that Stuart Gordon admitted in an interview that this was one of the gory scenes he put in the film, knowing that the censors would cut it, that this is something that directors would do. You would try to overload a first cut of the film with a bunch of gory scenes that you knew the censors were going to cut, in the hopes that you could keep the ones that you needed for the story. So Gordon admitted the sequence wasn't necessary to the film. He only put it in because they knew they would cut it, but now it's considered a director's cut, and this is the version you have to get. I don't like that. I wish there was a Blu-ray release of the theatrical version. Yeah, it doesn't ruin it for me. I just preferred the neatness of the original version. I feel the same way about the director's cut of RoboCop. The extra bits of gore at the beginning of the film I don't think actually help the movie any. I think the theatrical cut was better. But now that's the version you have to buy. I don't know why this is a thing. Maybe it has to do with licensing. You know, in order for it to be a new version of the film to release, you have to make some kind of change. So I don't know why they do it. I just wish they wouldn't. So, From Beyond, from 1986. A wild, fun, pervy take on an H.P. Lovecraft classic. So what are some of your favorite Lovecraft films? Did you think Reanimator was better? Have you seen Castle Freak? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you heard, press that like button and subscribe. And consider becoming a patron of the new show. I could use your help. Alright, this is Random Rob for the new show, signing off. I'll see you next time. The new show is made possible by generous support from viewers like Tony, Luz, Arnell, Skipnick, Christopher, Eric, and B. Thank you so much for your support.